Hey.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea Up Late. I am joined, as always, by my trusty sidekick, retired homicide lieutenant Brian Sanders. Brian, how you be?
Oh, I'm good.
You doing good?
Yeah, I'm always doing good.
Well, I like that attitude.
Just like you, you're always doing good too.
For the most part. Teenagers are a little stressy. You know what I'm saying? But outside of that, it's all
They
good.
can be. They
It's
can
all
be.
good. Woo-wee. Welcome back, everybody. If you're new here, welcome. This is a true crime podcast. As I stated a moment ago, Brian Sanders is a retired homicide lieutenant. So, of course, his expertise lends a lot of knowledge and great examples and interesting viewpoints to the cases that we cover. We do cover mainly, I would say, 99% unsolved or unresolved cases, would you say?
Yes.
And that can make it for a long study session in getting to our Tuesday night. Because as we know, if something's unsolved, there's a reason for that. And there's always a lot more to cover. And tonight is no exception. And we're going to get right to it here in a moment. The case we are covering tonight is a bit newer than ones that we've covered recently. This one takes place out of Tennessee in the year 2021. So I say it often, but this is a doozy. There are there's one particular investigator who's done, I think, a 10-part, series on this case. So I could make it its own Patreon or something. But we refuse to make money on this podcast. So we're not going to do that.
Not going to do that.
It's not going to do that. So if you are new here, just know as well that we are a live YouTube show. On Tuesday nights, we air Night Shift with Andrea Up Late every Tuesday night at 8, 7 Central or somewhere 3 or 4 hours before or after that. And then sometime this week, we will drop to wherever you stream your audio podcast, which is a bit of our bigger platform. But we do enjoy the live shows because we get to interact. And that said, it doesn't cost a dime. So you can log into a YouTube if you have a YouTube channel. If you don't, you can subscribe. All you need is an email. Again, you were assigned one of those at birth. So just log right on in and you can chat with us. If you have questions throughout the show, we try to get to them as we go. If not, we definitely discuss them afterward once we kind of banter with our buddies in the chat. So welcome and come aboard. So do you have anything that you feel like you have to disclose tonight before we get started?
No. I think you've got a lot to cover.
I do.
So I do not want to distract you or slow you down.
I do.
With any kind of stupid, long, drawn-out stories or unfunny jokes.
That is so sad. We'll see. I'm at a place in my life, you guys, where when I wear my regular glasses, I can see like a champ in the distance, and then I can see nothing up close. So these will be coming on and off as the evening goes on. So we will start without further ado. Again, this is quite a long case, but I do want you guys paying attention, and I really want you involved because there's a lot of moving pieces, and I'll be very curious. You remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books? Mm-hmm. I often feel like our unresolved cases can be like that. And this one is certainly no exception. So this one will have multiple avenues for you to choose your adventure, and you kind of pick what you think might have happened by the time we're done with this show tonight. Wow, there is some noise in the studio. I don't know what that was.
Sounds like Starcade 83 in the studio.
Maybe she had a little communication with our studio sharers. Less than that, a little bit. All right, guys, I'm going to go on and get started. Tonight, we're going to be talking about sweet little 5-year-old Summer Wells. You may have heard of this case. Again, it was 2021, so it's in the more recent history, and it's right outside of around East Tennessee. So Summer Wells was born on February 4th of 2016. And in the summer of 2021, Summer Wells was a 5-year-old little girl living in Rogersville, Tennessee. Rogersville is in East Tennessee, and it resides in Hawkins County. So it was actually settled by the grandparents of Davy Crockett. Did you know that?
I did not know that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's in the northeastern part of Tennessee, right along the Virginia border. In fact, the metropolitan part of the town shares like a Tennessee-Virginia metropolitan district designation. This is a pretty rural area. It's full of hills, and it kind of is starting to get into the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. Go Volunteers. So Summer lived with her parents, mom, who was named Candace Bly, B-L-Y was her maiden name. She goes back and forth, her distinctions on which name she goes by, her maiden or her last name. But Candace Bly is her mother, and her dad is Don Wells. Also living in that home were Summer's 3 brothers. They were 12, 9, and 7 at the time that this all takes place. Okay, so we've got a 12, 9, 7-year-old boys, and then 5-year-old Summer. Also on their property lived Candace's mother, who went by Candy, but I'm just going to call her Grandma to avoid any confusion in the names here for the show's sake. So Grandma lived in a camper there on their property. We have differing sources as to exactly how far from the back door Grandma's camper was. I'm going to show you pictures. When I say, poverty, rural, in the mountains, it's exactly kind of what I believe you would think or picture. And either way, I would say at best, Grandma's camper is no more than maybe 50 feet from their home. Would you say so as well?
Yeah, if even
at best. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's important for some things that we're going to cover later. Just understand that when I say she lives on the property, and they have this acreage, it's not like she's in the back 40. She's literally a stone's throw away from their door. Okay. So that's Grandma. So their home sits on top of a hill, like quite literally on top of a hill of 11 acres. So when I'm saying rural to you, that's exactly what I mean. So they live in what is called Ben Hill Road. Okay. Ben Hill Road. So when I say it's at the top of the hill, it's at the very top in a gravel driveway, kind of travels around to the top toward their home. And it partially circles around their home there. So in the summer months, the foliage is very heavy. All right. So there are mostly deciduous trees in that portion of Tennessee, meaning you're not getting all the evergreens. As they get straight into the mountains, you will find more cedar and pine and these kinds of things. But this is important. And we talk about this in cases because with the dense covering of deciduous trees, that means that in the wintertime, it's quite barren. Sound travels differently. The leaves on the ground could cover up things that you might want covered up, and you can see a much farther way away, especially with them being at such an elevated viewpoint, right? But that also means that in the summer, when those trees are full of leaves and the brush is thicker and the grass is taller, everything is much more concealed up there, meaning noises, are not going to travel the same, and your vantage point, or how far you can see from there is going to be significantly less in terms of seeing in from outside or out from inside. So keep all of those things in mind. And this case takes place in June. So that's when you would have minimal visibility in that sense. Okay. So the last time 5-year-old Summer was ever seen was June 15th of 2021. Now, I do want to show you before we get going at least one photo of the home and one photo of Summer, so you can kind of have in your mind's eye a little bit of what's going on here or what you can picture. Here's a little photo of Summer. I've got about 1 million more I'm going to show you as the evening wears on. Okay. Here's another photo of Summer. Okay. We're going to talk about those little teeth and some other things that we see on her as the show goes on as well. And this looks like, so that kind of, it's a little blurry, but it gives you a viewpoint of like an aerial or like a drone footage looking straight down. That would be the roof of their home. You can see the circular gravel driveway there and all the trees around. So that's kind of what I was referencing earlier. And just understand that that's at the top of that hill, right off of Ben Hill Road. Okay, so now you kind of have a little bit of an understanding of what's going on. So let's talk about the events that led up to the case that we will be discussing. So in terms of a timeline, one thing is absolutely certain, and that is that there is almost no certainty. Every one of the key players in this story is happy to tell you that either they don't pay attention to a clock. I don't know what time I left for work. It's within this hour span, and we've got about 3 to 4 solid adults that continuously have times that are a little bit ever changing, a little bit not off in the way that we talk about people during a crime when we say, well, it was a high stress. Bless you, everyone. Get a drink. That is Brian Sanders' nightly reminder to take your allergy medication. All right. So again, the time is a little fluid here, and that can provide a bit of frustration when you try to really nail this down and understand some of what's going on. So there is a multitude of discrepancies in time, times of trips, time spent at a location. We have he said, she said going on throughout, and just like the cases where we try to draw a line, almost even like a spectrum sometimes. When we talk about, let's say, law enforcement, for example, this case is a little bit different. So sometimes in cases in the past, if we're talking about like when something doesn't make sense and it has nothing to do with the perpetrator or the victim, it has to do maybe on investigation side. And sometimes we can't tell, what is sometimes negligence, what's ineptitude, what is inexperience versus corruption or cover-ups, which we know are much less likely. But sometimes one of those things might lead to another, right? And in this case, we're not actually referencing law enforcement in this way, but from the absolute start, the Hawkins County PD, the FBI, and the TBI, which is the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, have been all over this case, okay? So no qualms with law enforcement whatsoever here. Instead, this line that we have to draw to uncover the truth actually runs through and within the family fully. And you will see what I mean. So we have to use all parts of information that we have to try and weave this all together. Do you know how sometimes I've said, can you be a creep and not a murderer?
Mm-hmm.
This applies, right? So, or maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. We have for sure creeps. We don't know for sure if they're murderers. So on the morning in question, as Candace and Dawn will tell it, Dawn left at around 7 a.m. Again, I'm going to try to, for the sake of kind of a linear story, give you the story, and then the discrepancies that fall within, we're going to talk about on the back end. So Summer had been in bed with Candace and Dawn, and Candace woke Summer at around the same time. So around 7 a.m. If you go back and ask Dawn, he will tell you he doesn't remember what time he left for work that day, sometime between 7 and 8. Now, there are conflicting reports about this next part because Candace was leaving to take her mother to the doctor for knee pain. Some sources state that this was like an emergency room appointment, and other sources will sometimes say that it was like a pre-planned appointment, but more cases than not say that this was more of a non, like this wasn't an already appointed time. So this was more of an on the cuff that morning situation that grandma calls, her knee is hurting, and she wants Candace to take her to get it checked out. So they made the decision to leave the 3 boys at home. Again, they're 12, 9, and 7, okay? So Candace will say that they stayed home watching YouTube. Her words actually are they were locked in, all the doors were locked, no one in, no one out. You may picture these 3 boys who may be super self-sufficient, kind of piled up on their couch, eating Pop-Tarts and cereal and, watching YouTube on this summer day until mom gets home. And you're going to find that this is actually it couldn't be farther from the truth what this picture actually looks like. So remember that grandma lives right there on the property, literally right beside the home. So grandma, Candace, and Summer all head out with grandma to get her knee checked. They take grandma's truck. They drop grandma off, and Candace says that at this time, she receives a call from Hunter. So let me tell you who Hunter is. Hunter is a 15-year-old boy. He's a friend of the family, so to speak. The way Hunter tells it, he is, quote, like a brother to Summer. Candace says he's like another son to her, and we're going to get a little bit more into this as the case goes on. But for now, Candace says that Hunter happened to call her after she dropped her mom off to get her knee looked at. Okay, so again, I'm going to try to hold on to most discrepancies until the end, but know that this is one of the first bigger discrepancies because Hunter says that he received a text from Candace, and Candace says that he actually asked her to come over, and Candace said that she told him that he had to make sure it was okay with his mother. Okay, so already we have a he said, she said. Hunter says that she reached out first, and she says quite the opposite. So Hunter's mother is a woman named Allison. She goes by the name of Allie most of the time, and there is a history here. Candace and Allie used to be good friends. They had a falling out. I'm going to keep this brief. They had a falling out a while back. We'll get into that later on in the episode. Okay, so Hunter says that it's fine with his mom. He says that he kind of like jars his mom awake, who was sleeping because of some odd hours she was working at the time. And she kind of half sleepily says, yeah, that's fine. And so Candace and Summer pick Hunter up. There is confusion on how long exactly Candace and Summer spend inside Hunter's home when they go to pick him up. Okay. So not too much time has passed. And Grandma let Candace know that she was ready to be picked up, right? So they had dropped Grandma off. They go get Hunter, and now it's time to go get Grandma. So Candace says that at this time, they grab Grandma and head to Walgreens to drop her mother's prescription off. Now, the order of events here and the next few locations or errands that they run do change throughout. And when I say throughout, I mean there are dozens of interviews with a lot of these players. And they often, while keeping to the same script, so to speak, the order of things changes often. So Walgreens, so they go to drop off the prescription, and Walgreens tells them that this prescription will take approximately 20 to 30 minutes for the medication to be ready. So they decide to head to a local watering hole, if you will, to spend the time swimming. This is also known as Warriors Path State Park, and then horse stables. So there's like different parts of this larger state park there near the mountains. So this is probably, I think some would consider, I think there's two big chunks of the story. It's their outing to include this time at the watering hole, and then it's everything that occurs once they're back at home. Okay. So it's another area where Hunter and Candace have conflicting stories. Again, Hunter is 15. Okay. 15. And this is a child that Candace is in communications with, to kind of come run errands with her. If Candace is to tell it, it's to say that his mother did nothing with him. He was like a son to her. So she would pick him up and let him go about, like on a summer day like this, let him run around with them, which on the surface seems plausible and innocent enough. But I think we're going to find that this may be shaded a little differently as we go on. So Candace says that starting out, Summer left the house that morning in a bathing suit and shorts, but the plan had not been initially to go swimming. So remember, they say that when Grandma's medication gets dropped off at Walgreens, they have to wait this amount of time, 20 to 30 minutes, before they can, pick it up. And they say that they decide during this time to go swimming. Hunter will say initially they were all going to go fishing, that Candace reached out to him saying, would you like to go fishing? But then when Grandma winds up being ready earlier than they thought was going to be picked up, they change it to swimming. But Summer already has on a bathing suit from earlier that morning. Now, this may not be really that big of an inconsistency, because I know that in the summertime, I keep beach chairs. I usually keep a bathing suit in the car. I know I lived in East Tennessee for a few years when my kids were young. And so it wouldn't be crazy that they would wear like swim trunks and a t-shirt when we go out for the day, because you might find yourself in a creek or in a river. So I don't think that in and of itself is strange necessarily. But when Summer had the bathing suit put on her is where they're also going to differ. Hunter says that when Candace and Summer arrived at his house, Candace changed Summer into her bathing suit there at his house. Candace is adamant that Summer already had a bathing suit on. This may seem insignificant, and maybe it is, but I've already, I think, listed either 3 or 4 inconsistencies between Hunter and Candace's story already, and we are just getting started. So, like I said, Candace says that Summer ran out toward the water, and Candace will say that as soon as they got there, Hunter went down the path and turned right. She didn't really know where he went, and that she and her mom walked down a different path, and that her mom wanted to pick flowers. And there are certain points throughout this case where you're going to find that Candace is very specific in the verbiage that she uses, and she will regurgitate this on every news outlet, every podcast, every YouTube channel, and every newspaper that she finds. And so there are certain sentences that she has stuck to. And they're always just they seem to be insignificant parts of the story when we're talking about a day that her daughter went missing. So we talk about this often, like the biggest day of your life. Some of these more insignificant details are the ones that we're kind of really hitting hard, right? Hammering down and more specific with. So she makes a point to say that her mom wanted to pick these flowers as they're walking around, but that she told her mom, quote, "You can't pick those. This is a state park. You'll get arrested, and I don't want that on me." I chuckle because we're going to learn a little bit more about the criminal background of a lot of the people involved here. And I think that picking some small wildflowers from a state park that's fairly unattended would not be something that's necessarily on the radar here. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of that's a detail.
That's it.
I think that we're going to continue, listen out for them. Again, I feel like I should make bingo cards for some of these cases, but like, listen out and like chime in when you hear another time that Candace might kind of go out of her way to show that she's law abiding or that she's a really good mom, or things like this.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like when people were like, "Oh, I mean, I didn't do anything. I was just driving," and that's when see, I didn't want to take a left because I knew I couldn't do an illegal left turn. Yeah. So it's like, well, let's talk about the Draco in the back seat.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
No, you got it.
So, so that's what she says. She tells her mom, and also just these very specific sentences, right? Like, and I don't want that on me. Like, I don't know. So Hunter, however, has a different story. He says that he and Candace watched TikToks on his phone down by the water while Grandma sat in the truck. She was loading more minutes onto her prepaid phone. This actually would make a little more sense, be it that Grandma was having issues with her knee, and most all interviews. Well, okay, I take that back. She's only done a couple interviews, not many interviews at all, but the ones she's done, she's pretty much always sitting. Doesn't really look like the picture of health. And the pathway to get down to the water from where they had parked the truck would be a bit, more of a rough terrain in that sense to walk through. If you're a little bit older, having issues with your knee, that might be a little difficult. So Hunter's story about he and mom watching TikToks while Grandma's in the car recharging or, purchasing minutes for her phone makes a lot of sense. But Hunter says that at one point he looks up and he realizes that Summer had gone underwater. Okay. So here I'm going to let you listen to Hunter talking about this time at the lake. Now, I will pull from other interviews sometimes. I certainly don't generally pull clips from other podcasts, but there's an investigator, Chris McDonough, who did, when I say a deep dive, I mean, he was like essentially taking it upon himself. He's not getting paid. He's not doing this as a private investigator hired by law enforcement or citizens or Summer's family or anyone else. He is a retired homicide detective, and he has kind of gotten into some of these colder cases. And right off the rip, he decided to head over to East Tennessee. He's from LA, and just see what he could kind of dig here. And I will tell you that Brian and I have both listened to him. He seems to do a really good job as an investigator and as an interviewer when he speaks with Candace and when he speaks with Dawn in a way that they don't feel like they're being interviewed for sure. He's just having a conversation, and occasionally he will stop and go back alone when he's not in the middle of having, talking to them, and let you know kind of, okay, see, if you listen to that there, like if you didn't know better, you would think he was one of their dear friends. Which if you're not forward thinking there, it could be a little frustrating because it almost feels like he's giving them a little bit too much grace. Now, I will say he does subscribe to the way that you often talk about handling, either people you were arresting, gang members, anyone it may be, that first and foremost, he says, treat with respect. Like eventually the truth will come out. But in the meantime, you just talk, and so it was reminiscent of you a lot of the times when I was listening to this. But so that's what he's got, a podcast and a YouTube channel called The Interview Room. So if you want to spend hours and hours listening to the case about Summer Wells, definitely check him out because it's fantastic. But I did pull some of the clips from where he was either interviewing them, the different players here. On night shift, we do like to reach out to people and we do like to talk to people. I'll be honest, this wasn't one where I had any desire. They've talked enough. You can find them talking anytime you pull up a YouTube or a Google. So you can find mom and dad sprinkled throughout everywhere with this case. So I was fine not having an interview of my own here. But let me play for you this. And this again is Hunter, the 15-year-old friend of the family that's gone to the watering hole with Candace and Summer and her mom, the grandma. And this is what he says about this time. Let me make sure I'm going to show you the right one or play you the right one. Oh, that's not going to be it. Hold, please. Okay, here we go. I think we've. Hang on, you guys. I'm so sorry for this. Oh, my stars, y'all. There it is.
From there, what happened? Or at that moment, what happened? Do you go in the water first, or who goes in the water?
Summer was in the water because I was drinking the tea at the time.
Got it. Where were you at?
I was just standing around. Me and her mom was watching.
What are you talking about?
TikTok. Like, she was on TikTok looking at funny videos.
Okay.
And then she was looking through Facebook. We just have, like, our normal conversation.
And like what?
Like, we just talk about what we've done the past week, how long we haven't seen each other for. That's just what we just mainly do, just hang out.
Okay. Does she like you?
No.
Not in that way?
She has a husband.
Okay, but in that way, does she like you?
No.
Did you get that vibe? At all?
Nah, she just treated me like her adopted son. If
Okay.
I can say that.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And from there, where's Grandma at this point?
She was still in the car because she had a call to get her phone turned on.
Okay, whose phone is she using?
She's using a little bit, yeah.
From there.
Okay. One thing you may have picked up on would be where it sounds like Hunter is almost going to slur or his voice gets a little deeper. This is a fake yawn. So he's got almost 2 hours worth of interviews with Hunter, and probably every 15 seconds is another fake yawn.
Mm-hmm.
We picked up on it immediately, and this can be looked at. I'm sure if you're some behavior specialist, you could find more ways to look at this, but I know number one for sure, it can be an indication of lying. I think particularly in younger people, in minors, I've known children like this, that when specifically that if there's a fake yawn, it is accompanied by an untruth, like immediately. And then, we discussed also maybe this is just kind of a tick. Maybe it's something that he started doing and then it became habitual in his speech. So we don't know. So we haven't, of course, analyzed Hunter in that sense. But that's where he goes on to say about how that Grandma was adding minutes to her phone and Mom was watching TikToks with him down by the water. So let's see here.
Spooked. Like, I get a little bit, like, shook for a second.
Right.
That's it.
Okay. She got nervous.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
And did you call her?
Yeah,
So this is leading into Hunter describing an event that took place. He is going to talk about the fact that when he and Mom are watching TikToks on his phone, at some point, he looks in the water and realizes that Summer has gone underwater. He's asked multiple times how long he thinks she was underwater, and I don't think he ever gives an estimate of more than 10 to 15 seconds. And we're going to see what he has to say about that. Now, it's very important to know that Candace will say this never happened. But supposedly the two of them were standing there together watching these TikToks. So this just started with him saying he was spooked. He was explaining to the interviewer that he was not scared, per se, that he had gotten spooked.
like Summer, but I don't know if you can hear underwater like that.
So can you see her underwater?
No, yeah, you can see her. I can see her. It's just that I was wanting to make sure that she was okay.
Got it. Straight up. And what happened?
I just pull her up, bring her over my shoulders. I say, "Are you okay?" She goes, "Yeah."
Did she spit up water or anything?
She did spit up water.
Was she laughing?
She was just laughing. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just saying because after the effect of that, because it was a short period of time before they dropped me off that she said that she was missing.
Got it.
Okay. You may have heard those yawns again. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say sometimes, and he knows what he's doing. I'm not like second guessing him. Yeah. But sometimes a leading question, because he said, what did however
was
he
she
worded,
choking,
like,
spitting on water or whatever?
Yeah, and then he said, Was she laughing? I forgot now what he said.
He did.
Exactly.
Now, that is one leading question for sure. That
Yeah.
in this part of the interview, he did, because he said, was she laughing? And then Hunter says, yeah, she was
she
laughing.
Right.
And then ultimately he wraps it around to essentially say, like, was she happy? Was she doing okay? Because later on, Hunter will go on to say that he thinks potentially something that could have happened to her that we're going to dive into more could potentially be like a secondary drowning. And so we'll discuss exactly what that means. And so Hunter is referencing that time that he saw her underwater. And so that's why the interviewer, Chris, is trying to specify, what did she look like? What was she acting like? What, if any, were her symptoms when she came out of the water? And if you heard what Hunter said, it was that she was happy. Mm-hmm. She was smiling. He does go on to say that they, she giggled and she was fine coming out of the water and getting in the vehicle once they left. So just take that for what it's will. Again, Candace, though, the mother, states that this never happened. So she has zero recollection of Summer ever going under the water like that. Again, Summer is only 5 years old. She's also a very small 5. So they swim for approximately 20 minutes. They then leave to drive back to Walgreens to pick up Grandma's medication. After this, the group continues to Sonic for slushes. If you live somewhere that there's not a Sonic, this is just like a fast food. You drive to the booth and order your food and drive back. It's not a proper drive around in that sense. It's more of like a sock hop,
mm-hmm.
like a
like a 50s throwback,
right?
A little bit like that,
exactly. So you just pull into the little slots essentially with your car, order what you want, and leave. And so Mom says that they all got slushies. Candace says that after this they go to Priceless. Priceless is the name of a grocery store nearby, and that Candace and Grandma go inside while Hunter stays in the car watching TikToks with Summer. Now, we do talk about this often, but again, the specifics, right? And sometimes people can paint themselves in a corner when they're very, very detailed. And we have a lot of details here. So initially, Hunter said that they, meaning Candace and Grandma, were in the store for what felt like a very long time. I believe in some interview, he even says maybe almost an hour. He says for a long time, but Candace says it was only 5 minutes. Now, you'll understand or learn that when Candace says that something was only a certain amount of time, she's giving very small increments of time every single time, to the point that finally now, after hours and hours and hours on this case, I realized that it feels very much like she's shrinking that day down, shrinking that day. And so she says that she was in there for 5 minutes. So every time she's asked, how long were you in Priceless grocery store? She says just 5 minutes. Now, Grandma had gone to the emergency room for knee pain. I'm going to keep coming back to that. Candace, I want to show you a picture. Here's a photo of Mom, Candace on the left, and Dad, Don, on the right. When you hear them in interviews, which you will before this case is over, and you see their mannerisms and things, I think it's fair to say that Candace doesn't seem to do a whole lot of things quickly. I don't see her whisking in a grocery store. I'm not accusing Candace of guilt in this scenario. I'm just saying that some of this story doesn't always make a lot of sense, and 5 minutes into a grocery store and back out certainly doesn't, particularly when she's paired up with her mother who has the knee issue. Okay. And it's another confliction that we have against Hunter's story of them being in there a little bit longer. So Candace says that so sorry about that. So here's the list of errands that Candace says that they ran leading up to this grocery store trip. Okay. Bring out your whiteboard and let's get it all written down because it's a lot. So Candace says that their events were in this order that day: to the hospital to drop off Grandma, to pick up Hunter, to the smoke shop for a twisted tea, down the street to the hippie house where she gets the, quote, cheap vapes. That's where they have the cheap vapes. Then to Walgreens to drop off the prescriptions, then swimming, then to Walgreens to pick up the prescription, then to Sonic for slushies, and finally to Priceless grocery store with a partridge and a pear tree. So this is quite a busy day for an older woman who needed her knee checked out and potentially medication for it, it seems. Would you say? At this time, Candace says that she told Hunter that he would need to go home. And in fact, in the interview, she'll kind of chuckle and say, I told him, you can't come home with us. I'm going to take you home. I'm taking your butt home. And she says it kind of not sing-songy, but kind of joking, jovially. So she's taking him home, and then Candace and Hunter both agree that Summer was awake when he got out of the truck to walk into his home. There are some discrepancies here. Hunter's mother, Allie, will say that Candace would not allow her to walk over to the vehicle to say hello to Summer. Summer says that she tried to say hello to, or excuse me, Candace said she tried to say hello to Allie, and that Allie wouldn't look her way. Now, for right now, I will take both of those with a grain of salt because neither one have the most wonderful history, and they also have had a falling out. So they are not best of friends at this point. But just keep that in mind. So Candace and Grandma then head home with Summer in tow. At this point, it's only like a quick drive, maybe between 5 to 7 minutes or so from Hunter's home back to their house. And at some point during this time, Summer falls asleep. This could make sense easily. She's only 5 years old. She has been going all day. I just gave you that long list of errands they've been running, including swimming. And per Mom's own admission, it is now almost 3 p.m. and Summer has only ingested the slushie during that whole day. So the only thing that Summer has had to eat or drink all day long from her mom's timeline of around 7 to 8 when they left in the morning until almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon was this one Sonic slushie. Okay, so this is when we get the last ever picture taken of Summer. Candace said that she was driving, so she's driving Mom's truck. So she asked Grandma to take this picture. Candace will say that Grandma accidentally took a video, which, okay, easy enough to believe. She had it on video setting instead of photo. So when she takes this video, they did go on and put it on TikTok at that time. Mm-hmm. In it, you can hear Candace say, kind of quietly, "Is her arm still up?" She's referencing Summer and Summer's position. Grandma says, "No." And Candace says, "Well, that's what I was trying to get." Candace says that this is because when she's asked about it, why were you trying to get her arm up? And she said it's because Summer looked like her dad sleeping like that, like her dad, Don, slept with his arm up, and she wanted to capture in a photo Summer sleeping looking like her dad. I will say I don't buy that.
Hold up. They can see her. I mean, it's not right. I mean, it's not like they're looking into some.
I would assume if she's looking in the rearview mirror, she would be able to see Summer. I'm about to show you the photo, and she is sitting in the very middle seat of the back seat of this truck.
Yeah. And the grandmother's taking the picture, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Or the video.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mother's asking, is her arm
still up?
Is her arm still up? Okay.
Maybe.
Okay, I got you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking they're stationary. Sorry. In the parking lot. Yeah.
All right. So let me show you this photo. And this is going to be the photo that for the last almost 4 years now, we're almost to 4 years exactly since Summer's disappearance, has been the cause of either concern, theories, I mean, everything under the sun. So let's see here. I'll give you. And as always, if you are listening via audio streaming, I will place these photos on the Andrea Upload Instagram page with the narrative of the show. I try to do that every week soon after we air. So let's see here. And I'm going to show you again. This will be the last. Oh, that's not it. The last known photo of Summer. I have 2 of them here, so I want to make sure I'm showing you the clearest one. One is a bit crisper than the other. If she looks a little different than the picture of the little girl I showed you a moment ago, there's a reason for that, and we're going to talk about that. But for now, what you're witnessing is Summer clearly not awake. Make whatever assumption you want as to whatever state she's in. Her arms are down, relaxed, left hand on her lap, right hand beside her. She's leaning to her right with the lap belt of the seatbelt around her waist and the shoulder strap behind her, as some kids do when they pull the shoulder strap behind them because they don't like it. It's not comfortable. And she's slouched over. She's to the right, laying on 2 gallons of milk. Now, 1 gallon of milk is lying on its side on the bench seat of the truck, and the other gallon of milk is upright, sitting like propped on top of the first gallon. Her head is against the side of the top gallon, and her arm, like her right elbow area, is kind of squished into the bottom jug lying there. There is wild speculation about this picture, particularly given the inconsistencies with some of the stories. And we are definitely going to be talking about this. And at some point during all of this, Summer was placed in what you see here, this full long sleeve and pants tracksuit. Now, when that happened has still been a source of confusion this whole time. There has never been a very clear answer as to when the tracksuit was placed on Summer. Now, prior to that, there is a photo of her in a vehicle wearing a bathing suit, and there is a pillow. Okay. When asked about the pillow, like, what is that pillow about? What is the pillow? Mom says, what pillow? And then when referenced again and kind of further explained, she says, oh, that's because Mom gets mad if her seat gets wet. So put the pillow there so that she could sit on it after she swam. And that makes sense, right? In this photo, she is not sitting on a pillow and she's in a tracksuit, which would still make sense in the way that if she's now dry and been changed. There have been some people have found some concern with the fact that she's in this full tracksuit in June in Tennessee after going swimming at a creek. It's hot. But Mom, I almost saved it for you guys to listen to, but it gets so mumbled, like you can't understand the second half of the sentence. She starts out strong, and then right when she's supposed to be kind of explaining it, I can't understand her at all. And this happens 2 or 3 times. So she will say at the beginning of all of this, when she's trying to break down the timeline for everyone, that Summer was in the bathing suit and shorts, and that she often had the windows rolled down because Summer would say, I get hot, Mama, I get hot. And when she's asked why she's in this tracksuit, she says, oh, it's because she gets cold. And something about, and the windows are, and I can't ever hear if she's saying like, and I had the windows down, or, and you can't quite tell.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything points to the fact that this tracksuit was supposed to have been a new outfit purchased by Grandma for Summer to start school in. There have been some issues with that in the sense that when school starts in Tennessee, it's not cold. If you're from the north, this may sound a little bit different, right? You're not getting a new coat to start school. Kids start school in short sleeve shirts, shorts, sandals, whatever, because it's still quite warm in August and September when school is getting started. So that's something to keep in mind. It may not be very significant, but it's something that has caused concern amongst some people who have followed this case. So at this time, Candace, Grandma, and Summer arrive home. She says this was around 3:15. That photo I just showed you was taken at 3:09 p.m. At least that's when she says it was taken. That's when it was posted. We know that metadata will show exactly when that photo was taken. So keep in mind with the he says, she says, the inconsistencies, all this stuff, this is absolutely an ongoing investigation. So there is so much that we don't know that investigators have. Again, it's 2021, which is kind of refreshing. We've been covering a lot of old cases where there wouldn't be cameras and, a lot of digital timestamps on things. Yeah. Now, this is a rural area. You're not going to find a lot of Nest cams, Ring doorbell cams necessarily on a lot of these homes. Not a lot of traffic stoplight cameras, that's for sure. But you're going to have a receipt from Sonic, right? You're going to have that debit card transaction. You're going to have Walgreens transactions when they dropped off that medication, when they picked it up. You're going to have somewhat of cell phone pings as they get out into the watering hole and back. And so, these things law enforcement does have, and we don't. So a lot of these things, I'll be so interested one of these days. I do think this will be solved. But I will be so interested as to what they have had this whole time in terms of when we're like, that kind of sounds funny. And like when they sit back quietly, like, why they know why it sounds funny, what that is exactly. So like I said, that photo was taken at 3:09 p.m. Candace states that Summer jumps right out of the car when they get home. She wakes right up, hops out. Candace says that she calls the boys out to come help unload groceries. She said that they divided them all up and what was Grandma's and what was theirs. She said that they always did it this way. And at this time, Grandma takes her groceries the few steps to her camper, and Candace and the boys take theirs inside. But do you remember earlier when we were talking about the priceless grocery store and how Candace said that she was in 5 minutes? In fact, her words verbatim are, quote, got my milk and got right back in the car. I was there for 5 minutes. Yet when she gets home, she calls the boys out to help unload groceries, and they divide them up amongst Grandma and Candace. Right? So that's something that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And we know that as things continue to not make sense, there's a reason for that. Okay. So a bit later, Candace says that her mom is sitting on the front steps of the camper. She says, I kind of look over at her, and mom's kind of like kind of sitting there. And so Candace inquires, what's wrong, Mom? And evidently her mom says, those cactus really need to be repotted. I just want to show you a picture of the yard. Because, and maybe she is a succulent lover at heart and couldn't stand for them to be constrained in an ill-fitting pot. I might not have actually given you a great... that actually kind of looks fantastic compared to the rest of it. I'll show you some more photos of what surrounds the home. We're talking rusted, like oil barrels, an old school bus that's like gutted, trash, like lots of things are strewn throughout the entire yard, piles of things, debris. So it is, and maybe Grandma, the succulent lover, is ready to repot these cactus plants.
Yeah.
Maybe. It's just kind of an interesting, again, we're back to plants. Remember, she wanted to pick the flowers earlier. Now we're repotting plants. And so she says that she then calls Summer outside to help them repot the flowers. She jokes that she knows that the boys wouldn't want to do that. And she goes into detail about Summer's part in this. She said that they had not long before gone to visit Gatlinburg on vacation and had gone to the gem mine and received small pebbles. And so when they repotted the cactus plants, Summer places some of these small pebbles on top, and Summer loves Paw Patrol. So if you learn nothing else from Candace, it'll be that Summer loves Paw Patrol. That's the one thing you're going to learn about her child. And so she put her Paw Patrol puppies out there in this cactus pot. So again, we've got a lot of detail on a very insignificant event. We don't have a lot of detail from Candace on swimming at the watering hole, other than her mom wanted to pick flowers and that would be illegal, right? And like here we are, like no detail when it comes to Summer, though. So here they are. Also, keep in mind, we don't have a lot of detail about the boys. So I think that one glaring thing to me throughout all of this is how distant the idea of the boys are to this whole day. Like they're in the home for the day, locked in, nobody can come in, can come out because they're safe watching YouTube. I'm going to show you in a moment a tour of the inside of the home, and you'll see what the boys were in for that whole day. And the fact that basically she may or may not call them out to help with groceries, but then like we're back to Summer coming out for the plant. So there's just a lot of aligning with Summer and really not much talk about her other 3 children this for the whole day. Not even like a, man, I looked at the time and realized they've been there all day long for like 8 hours. I'm kind of ready to get back. I was ready to get back to the boys. So we did this or we did that. Like there was none of that talk either. So she says that she explains all of that about repotting the flowers. She said that they wash their hands and Grandma gives Summer a piece of candy. Candace says that Summer asked to go inside and play with her brothers. And so Candace, again, at every single interview, every time, she makes it a point to say, I walked her over to the door and I yelled into the house and I said, boys, watch your sister. And they said, okay. And I watched her walk inside. I've had a problem with that since the beginning. And again, you guys listen, there's so much to this case. There's so many more details that there's no way we're going to cover in one episode. So, and I'm not making this a multiple part show. So we're just covering as much as we can with the details we can tonight. Please don't think that I'm armchair quarterbacking accusing this mother of any one particular thing right now. In fact, I will say that I have a few ideas, but I have no idea what actually happened that day to Summer. There's a reason this is still unsolved. I would garner to believe that it's less because investigators don't know what happened, and more that they've got to get exactly what they need to seal a charge. So please don't think that I'm just accusing mother at every turn, but I'm just calling out the things that don't make a lot of sense. And I personally am a pretty involved mother. I would, when my kids were that age, whatever, I get it. It's a small child. This is your own property. And we're going to talk about it, but later we have a multitude of quotes from Dawn and from Candace talking about Summer being an outside girl. She's an outdoors girl. In fact, a lot of the pictures we have of Summer, she's barefoot. She's, maybe hopefully having a good time. She's dirty. She's outside. I don't think for one moment the woman who arguably bought the Twisted Tea for the 15-year-old boy and shared a vape with him while she's watching TikToks while her 5-year-old is in a lake, or a watering hole, if you will, felt the need to walk, I think, 10 steps from where their car was, or where the flower pots were, to the side door, to very intentionally articulate to the boys to watch their sister, and then wait for them to say, "Okay, Mom," and then watch, say that she watches her walk in. Does that raise any flags to you at all?
Yeah. When, she's saying that's the last time I saw my daughter. Right?
Yes, that would be the last time.
That would be the last time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know we're missing things like what the boys' statements are, things like that.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
That's going to be 80% of this case.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also the recovery. So oftentimes you can have in a missing person, because basically that's what you're doing. You can have everything that all points these big arrows to murder, but until you recover a body, you don't charge. Usually, you're not going to charge with murder, and that could be a lot of this. But she puts that timeline to what, 5 minutes?
We're about to get there. It's less than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually less than that. The 5 minutes was her time in the grocery store. Yeah. Where she either got her milk and got out, or she got enough groceries that they had to divvy them up between grandma and herself when she got home.
And that's what, when these are the issues with, like you said, you're not saying she did anything, killed or whatever, but the issue is you can't even get through a simple timeline through the day. And it seems like when you're wrong, it's really wrong.
Big wrong,
Instead of saying, well, I was in the grocery store for an hour, or I got a bunch of items, I grabbed my milk and came out. Why is it that you can't be in the grocery store for an hour?
Right. Exactly. So Candace says that at this time, she walks Summer to the home. She confirms with the boys that they're going to watch Summer. She turns around and walks the dozen steps it is. It's not to her mom's camper to help her with her knee brace. Now, I will tell you, while we've gotten very specific on a lot of things, I've not yet, and I mean, it could be out there. And if you have this, someone like send this to me, but I've not found anywhere where it says, and Mom called me, or Mom hollered out the door, or Mom asked me to come fix her knee brace. Mm-hmm. I've not found anywhere where she says, because she's gotten so detailed about repotting this cactus, and exactly what she said to the boys about watching Summer. And then her next sentence is, and then I walked over to Mom's camper to help her with her knee brace. Mm-hmm. But, and maybe they talked about it earlier, but she'd never said, Mom wanted me when we got done doing those flowers to come over there. And this is a woman who's found the need to be specific at different times. So she said that she walks over to Mom's camper and adjusts the knee brace. Again, camper is right there. Boom. Right beside the house. And that she turns around and gets back to the house. And she, I mean, to all things holy, will tell you that it was 2 minutes. I was gone no longer than 2 minutes from the time I told the boys to watch Summer to my mom's camper, fix her knee brace, and come back. She says she comes back and she says, hey, boys, where's Summer? So I don't think this ever happened either. I don't think that she's walking in the kitchen immediately asking where's Summer? Why wouldn't she just kind of think that she's in the home? I mean, maybe after a couple minutes, like, oh, did your sister go back outside, or did your sister go downstairs? Maybe. But she walks in and immediately, where's Summer? Okay. So the boys say that she went downstairs to play with toys. This is what Candace says that the boys said. Okay. Remember, we don't have any of the boys' statements, right? Because they're minors who have talked to police in an ongoing investigation. So they said that she went downstairs to play with her toys, and Candace said that at this moment she goes downstairs and calls Summer's name and doesn't see her. And she's starting to get nervous. And she said she walked outside and she called her name and she was, quote, just gone. And she'll say over and over again, in 2 minutes. She was just gone in 2 minutes. And we're going to, trust me, we are going to comb through what that means and what that would look like for Summer to have up and vanished like that. So Candace says that she panicked and called Dawn. But she always says that this is another specific thing she'll say. I called Don. He told me to call police. So I ran over to my mom's camper and got her phone because her phone has better service than my phone. So I used her phone and called 911. So we always hear this part of the story. Okay. Yeah. And so she calls 911. And we haven't talked a whole lot yet about Dawn, but boy. Here's a picture of Dawn and Candace here. Is that supposed to be Summer on his shirt?
Yeah. That's what I was just thinking.
Or what was the one Wilson Phillip with the blonde hair? The skinny one with the bowl cut?
The one that my brother used to call me Wilson Phillips.
Yeah.
Yeah, whichever one had the bowl cut.
Yeah, maybe it's a picture of her.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a picture of Dawn and Candace. So Dawn was at work all day, right? Isn't that where Dawn's been since morning? That's what he told us. And so Dawn says that he threw his tools in his truck and he started driving home. There's a sense of urgency here. Like, Candace says that she was gone for 2 minutes. And now Summer's gone. And within moments, she's calling Dawn and he's barreling home. I grew up out in the country. Like, I'm saying it's going to be more than 2 or 3 minutes before my mother is panicked. I could be anywhere. I mean, up a tree, in the creek, doing whatever. So this is just, another one of those. My bingo card is getting full of things that don't quite make sense here, but just keep that in mind, okay? So he says that he got home in half the time it would normally take him. He states when he gets there, he knew they would, quote, all be up at the top of the hill looking, so I didn't even go up to the house. I just started looking down at the bottom. Again, this is 11 acres up a pretty decently inclined driveway up to the top of their house on the hill. So he gets a panicked call from Candace. It startles him enough to what he said was, I almost lost it on a couple of turns coming home because he was driving so fast to get there. And when he gets there, he doesn't even go to find Candace. I would think that I'm finding my person, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to grab you and say, what is it? Have you found it? What is going on? Who's here? Have we talked to anyone? He says that he didn't even go up to the top of the hill. He said, they got that. They're going to be up there looking. So I'm going to start at the bottom. And he said that as soon as he saw people looking around there at the bottom, I, quote, knew she was gone forever.
Yeah.
He hasn't even driven up his driveway yet.
Yeah.
What say you, homicide man?
Anytime somebody goes past police or a group of people like that to a location that they say they're going there to look for something and then they don't necessarily, potentially they're either going to get something that they possess illegally that they have stashed somewhere,
okay, or
time to get rid of whatever they've got on their person or in their vehicle that they shouldn't have. Or maybe they're still just stalling, like, I don't know what I'm going to say yet. I don't know. It could be all of that. It's not normal, and it's definitely a huge red flag. Most people don't go to the extreme
opposite location,
especially in a remote area like that. The first thing you're going to think is, could have gone out in the woods, could have wandered out in the woods. That would be the first thing than most people think.
So if you're looking at this photo here, again, here's another aerial view. I think that let me see if I uploaded the one. You guys, hold on to your horses because we've not even, it's not that we have that much time left, but we've got a lot of heavy stuff that you're going to learn. So there's an arrow here pointing to kind of the side / back of the house. This is where the basement walkout door would lead to. If you look on the other side up toward the top, you'll see what looks kind of like a lean-to type covering shade area. That would be the front door. Okay. So if you look farther back, that's grandma's camper right back there. So that gives you a little better idea of the proximity of that camper. So when she said that she walked into the house to walk Summer in, that would be not where the red arrow is, but where that covered arrow is. And that's going to be over that front door. She walked there, kind of leaned in and told them to watch the girl, turns around, walks back to that camper right there and comes back. And she said it took 2 minutes. And in that amount of time, Summer was gone. Please look around this home. Look at those trees. This is very indicative of that time. In fact, this is one of the photos taken at that time. It was June. It was summertime. Those trees are huge. So that, again, I think reiterates the oddity in Dawn's behavior. You know, like Brian was saying, why not go to where she went missing? That's not like in the cul-de-sac next door or something. Like, there's a lot of ground to cover for a tiny child. You've got to think, not only was she only 5 years old, Summer Wells was around 3 feet tall and 40 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
She was small. She was actually, I'm going to not feel bad about saying smaller than she should have been. Based on the size of her parents, there's no reason to indicate that this child, outside of malnutrition and some other things, should not have been the size that she was.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, when he goes to the bottom and says, I knew she was gone forever, he hasn't even gone to their driveway. In fact, look at this, because this is what's causing a lot of concern for people following this case over the years, is that by his own admission, Don says that when he got there, basically he passed the area that would take him straight up his driveway. There's an idea of like the driveway leading up to the home. He passed that and he went to his shed. So his shed is exactly what it sounds like. It's a bit of a bit dilapidated wooden old shed. Like, that's fine, but it's down by the highway, by the actual road, not up by their home. So he went to the shed. When asked about that, we don't get a lot of specifics, whereas we get them sometimes in other parts of the case. So he'll say that, I didn't think anybody was looking down there, so that's where I wanted to look. But then he denies ever really going in the shed. Doesn't make a lot of sense. That one's always kind of skirted around a bit. So something just to keep your ear on. I don't know. It's an interesting one. But he knew she was gone forever, I think, was probably, there have been a lot of red flags. That was probably one of the bigger ones to smack me in the face here. No, I've not ever heard a parent say that about a missing child. And we're talking within the first half hour that the kid's missing.
Mm-hmm. That's usually like once the panic sets in and they make the phone calls and then they start to worry.
Or even calling 911 that quickly. Number one, it's really just not likely. I'm sorry, it's not. Even with your most dedicated helicopter parent, if you will, to live in where they lived, there's no reason. Even if you live in any other kind of neighborhood on any street, really, in that amount of time, you're not calling 911. You're not panicked like that yet. And I briefly gave a story. I was talking to Brian about it, but the youngest, we were on the boardwalk, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, a few years ago. And at the time, he was 8 or 9. And it was a very busy part of the season. And there's a lot of tourists. And it had gotten packed. And the kids and I kind of had our routine down packed. And they know not to venture from me, and always would have to have them within, like, basically physical. If I could reach them, we're good. And so next thing you know, though, I blink my eyes and the youngest is not where he's supposed to be. He had gotten permission to go ahead to sit on this one bench while myself and the older child got things packed up, and that was fine. He had done it before. There was just a miscommunication. He thought I meant a different Minch. I did not. It didn't matter though, because in the meantime, panic did ensue. Like, my heart dropped. It's, one of the scariest things if you've ever experienced that feeling. And just to see all the tourists. And I was telling Brian that, like, I didn't want to tell the cops. I mean, I knew I was going to have to, but almost to do that is to kind of succumb to that, like that something really bad, like your kid is missing. It's a terrible feeling. And so, and with every step I took, it was that there were plenty of cops at hand. I didn't want to tell one of them yet, because I thought, I'm going to find him. I'm going to see him. And then conversely, I would continue to have the thought of, but with every minute that goes by, one of these people who don't live here in my town could have him and be going farther away from me. Right. So ultimately, that's what led me to pull an officer aside. And long story short, we found him within no time at all. And it was so sad and horrible and great and wonderful at the same time. Right. But my point is, even then, I still remember, this was years ago, the conscious thought of, gosh, I don't want to have to tell a police officer. Like, that means that my kid's missing.
Right. Yeah.
And that was with a whole bunch of strangers, hundreds and hundreds of strangers on a packed boardwalk. Yeah. And so obviously that's why I did tell someone. But in my own home, it's just not likely that you're going to do that.
Usually, most people search their home first, and then they start searching the surroundings.
She doesn't even say anything about going through the entire home.
Right. And I thought on just right off the top of my head when I was on patrol, same thing. A woman did panic, woke up from a nap, and called the police. We get there, search, child's nowhere in the home. Mother's going into full-blown panic mode. The next door neighbor was actually watching the kid. The kid was around 4 or 5, if I remember right. Got up, like both had fallen asleep for a nap. Child got up, and the next door neighbor came by looking for something or whatever it was, knocked on the door, and then didn't want to bother the mother, so she just let her watch like cartoons and gave her some cookies.
That's fair.
But it's that once the thoughts start to flood into your brain that your child's not in the home and not in the surrounding area or with your next door neighbor or your grandmother, in this case, but the whole idea to go straight to like the worst case scenario.
One for him, I knew we would never see her again. Those are his words. That was his first thought, he says, upon arriving home. All right, so let's get through the rest of this. And we'll get into that part of it. So from the very start, Don had stated that Summer was abducted. Okay. So he literally used words. She was abducted. She was trafficked. She was kidnapped. He'll say, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that someone came on our property and lured her away. If you remember, though, per Candace's account, she was only away from her for 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we've talked about someone when they want to be real specific with the timeline or with an alibi, they can paint themselves in a corner because suddenly that grocery store, we've got a lot of things that don't make sense. I'm going to attempt to screen share. This won't be pretty, but I want you to watch the video of one of the first interviews that Don and Candace did together. Let me know what you think. I think it's 12 minutes long. We're just going to play a few minutes of this. But let me do this. And I think that's... What am I doing? Oh, here we go. Okay. So it's going to be... So sorry. 1 second, you guys. Oh my goodness. Do you want to talk for a
minute? Yeah. When we were talking about we call them red flags. Everybody's got different terms for them, but when they start to stack up, and in this case, potentially they could recover her. She could have been kidnapped. And if that's the case, I still say, and you say too, there are red flags because the minute a parent starts to say, I knew she was gone forever, we'd never see her again. Was that because people who hang out with you that would do something like this, but yet for whatever reason, you're not putting that name out there with law enforcement because maybe you're tied into other stuff? drug trade, whatever. But that whole idea of just the
okay, listen up, y'all. Yeah.
No sound. No sound.
They're saying no sound?
They just said it.
Well, I want you to hear it. We'll come back to it. It's fine. Well, all right, guys. I'll figure it out. Turn up the sound on YouTube. What do you mean, Jonathan? I'm trying. Okay, we'll try one more time. I don't want a whole lot of... Okay, last time, guys. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Okay. It's turned up. I can't see what he's saying.
He's just saying turn up the actual sound. He could hear it a little bit.
Okay. Well, I thought it was turned up enough. Okay.
He may be talking about down at the bottom left.
Yeah, I already did that one. That's all the way.
Yeah.
Okay. Can they hear that?
Oh, I can't see it on my screen.
Was it not showing it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I'm done with this. We'll do this another time. Either way, what you need to know is that I thought I did, Jonathan. Okay. Either way, what you need to know there is that's the video where mom and dad continuously say that she was abducted. Basically, that's their narrative from the get-go. They refuse to say that she wandered off. When asked, is she one that would maybe go outside and chase a bunny and get distracted and be too far gone before you know it? They would say no. And they all the time will say that... So sorry, you guys. Will say that she was not one to wander off, that they had diligently told her about the wildlife around there, that they were scared of the bears and the snakes, what have you. And so they, again, by being so adamant about some of these things, paint themselves in a corner as well. And because of this, they immediately go toward what I think is probably the most terrifying option. I know I would much rather, in an unknown situation like this, no matter how scary it is, think that my child wandered off and take their chances with wildlife than with someone who knowingly came there to abduct them. Again, if this is a stranger abduction, this is someone who have had to know what's up there on top of the hill. I think it's very unlikely, we'll talk about why, that it would be an actual stranger abduction. Someone unknown to the family. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They only had a couple of neighbors even near being to the top of the hill. And there's just, they would have had known that Summer was there, per mom's story, within 2 minutes of being without an adult next to her, or, you know, or however else that might have occurred. So keep that in mind. It's the worst. So that interview as well is one where mom, her pupils are probably 1.5 millimeters, meaning that they are the size of just pinpoint. That can point to a benzo, an opiate, something. She talks slurred. Her eyes are almost closing some of the time while she's talking. You've seen the video. And then we find out that there's no... These two are no stranger to some of the drug game. They will have you know and want to believe that they became pretty adamant goers and regular goers to the Seventh-day Adventist church there in their hometown, and that they had been regularly going there. They had been going some. The kids were going some. And we're going to point out a reason that makes sense here in a moment. But the narrative that you get about him being a Reformed Christian and these things doesn't necessarily align with a lot of lifestyle stuff that we're going to talk about. So, let me see. I want this box to go away because it's driving me absolutely bonkers. Okay. Perfect. So, I want you to see the home. Well, I can't show you the stinking home because I don't think I can do that. Let me try that one more time. What did he say to do about volume? Okay. You can talk if you want to. Whenever I kind of get quiet, it'll be great.
Well, I didn't want to say anything in case you and I are different. You can multitask like nobody's business. I, meanwhile, am sitting here with like a Post-it note and I have to write things down in sequential order.
Mm-hmm.
When you were talking about what I was thinking, like when you can't articulate or you can't put a timeline down, it's very indicative, sadly, of people on heroin or, opioids where they go on the nod, where they're out for hours at a time.
Or even just pills.
Or pills, yeah. And in a drug unit trying to make deals and stuff, and people are out. They're on the phone at one point and then they're out cold. So I do wonder with that, her not being able to lock in accurate times, but locking them in so tight that it doesn't even make sense. Which also means she probably didn't think a whole lot about what she was doing when she started giving that timeline and starting to say that, it was only 2 minutes or that sort of thing. And that's where, to really good interviews, you can go back and keep going over timelines and saying, how do you know it was only 2 minutes? Because sometimes people can say, I got a text from my grandmother and it's right here on my phone at 12:01. And by 12:03, I was walking back in because Paw Patrol was just starting, or what, people can give you those references sometimes.
I don't think necessarily, now I'm not saying that she was sober the day in question. I think that it was an intentional. I think she's giving these smaller increments of time intentionally. Mm-hmm. Like I said earlier, I think she's trying to shrink down this day. I think there's a lot more unaccounted time than we've been told.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why we're getting 5 minutes at the grocery store, 2 minutes unattended. Again, though, remember, she didn't want her mom to pick flowers because that was illegal. I told the boys to watch Summer. They verbalized okay. Like, she's having to say, like, I only had my eyes off of her for 2 minutes. And the more I'm about to tell you, I don't feel bad to say that I think that there were hours during that child's day throughout her life that she was unaccounted for.
Yeah.
I'm going to try one more time to show you guys a video. If it doesn't have audio, just know that they're going to be walking into the home in question. Okay. And when we talk about Summer and the basement, Summer's bedroom, and then Crystal and Dawn will say, or Candace and Dawn, will say that their bedroom is down there with Summer as well. When I say downstairs, basement, bedroom, these are all words that I think are very loose interpretations of what the living conditions actually were and where these children, or at least Summer, were made to sleep. So again, if it doesn't have a ton of audio, that's fine. I just want you to visualize this, and then we're going to come right back to talking about it. Again, this would have been the interview with Chris McDonough.
It's not on my screen.
Oh my gosh. It's not on your screen. Are they not seeing it?
I don't think so.
Do you want to see if they're saying that?
Oh. Yeah, I don't think they can see
Well,
it.
not now because I took it off.
Yeah.
Okay. Last time.
All right, it's coming up now. All right, looks like it's good.
Okay, so he comes out, jumps up, goes right in. Okay, how many cats? You should have like a zoo license. I'm seeing all kinds of.
It's the living room area. That's where the boys are supposed to sleep in those beds right up front.
So what happened?
Yeah, they said.
So, okay, I'm going back. Can you guys hear me? Because I want you to see this. Hang on.
Yeah, they can hear you.
Okay, this is the kitchen / living area. Okay, now see that right there. Boom. Do you see that TV on that stand against the wall? So Candace will say that TV there, and if you see, there are some chairs, I think, below this table in the foreground right here. You're gonna see, like, I don't know, a lot of like toilet paper rolls and ceramics. I'm not even sure what. This is where she points as she's walking Chris in to say, this is where the boys sit glued to the TV all day. So this is where her 3 sons were supposed to have been sitting, quote, watching YouTube the entire day that they were gone running all those errands, meaning from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. Okay. For 8 hours, those boys were supposed to be right there looking at that TV. Now you're about to see the basement where Summer slept. So to give you a better reference point, if you see toward the right side of your screen, if you go down from where the TV is located, you see what looks like a bit of an exposed countertop curving around. That's what we're going to pay attention to as they walk through this part of the home. So that's when she says Summer's with her. They are going to go back right here into the home. And this is where she's going to show you. Oh, my goodness. An ad. What you know about it? That would be about right. All right. So she's going to show you where Summer sleeps. She said, that's where she said, boys, where's your sister? And they said she went downstairs to play. What in the Soviet bomb shelter?
I still can't figure out. I don't know.
So if you're listening, we are watching Candace crawl under basically a countertop into a hollowed out area, having to turn her body 180 degrees to then climb down essentially a ladder. And the interviewer is unsure of this, but she convinces him to come on down. And this is how little Summer, and in theory, herself and Dawn, are supposed to go downstairs. If you didn't see that right there, we've got Girls Gone Wild on the TV. And this is going to be down in Summer's bedroom. So please note, this is horrible. Later, the interviewer, Chris McDonough, who I told you is a retired homicide detective, equated it to a dungeon. He said, and if you could hear him here, he's talking to her very kindly and asking her all these questions. But later, he was just talking about the feeling down there. And it just looks absolutely horrible. Let me just turn that off. Ugh. Okay.
I want to say something real quick. Living conditions like that are not necessary or not
in poverty.
Exactly.
No,
that's what I was
precisely.
going to say. I have been in homes where people were flat busted broke and the house was clean and organized, and they'd say that right off the bat, like, you know, but that a lot of hazards going on. I don't know. It's got a lot of issues. A lot.
Yeah. Make no mistake. And Nighthawk Visuals just says straight neglect, not poverty. 100%. I've dealt with many of children in many different walks of life with many different capabilities financially.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a stark difference between love, affection, and sheer poverty, and then neglect and complete just maladaptive. Everything's it's horrible, and it's horrible to watch that. And when I mentioned that about Summer earlier, her teeth, her bone structure, her frame, the color of her skin, the bruises throughout her skin, you will see bruises. It doesn't take much to go back, look at photos of her. Listen, I would get into everything. I still do as an adult. Like, I was no little prissy girl. I was also climbing trees and fishing and doing all the things. So I get it. She lives out in a rural area. She's outside. She's got brothers. So did I. I had bruises too. You can spot bruises that are not from normal wear and tear. They're not from playtime. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of soft tissue bruises on areas that don't get banged up when you're riding your bike or climbing a tree. And you're going to find these things with Summer. So that gives you an idea of the home. And so we're just going to walk through some things now that are some of the more obvious discrepancies before we wrap it up on some theories. So we do have, when dispatch, we don't have, be it an ongoing investigation, the 911 calls that Candace made to report Summer missing. Potentially Candace and Don called 911 while he was leaving work and while she was at home, but that's not necessarily corroborated. And again, their stories change so much that it's hard to say, but we know that at least Candace called. And what has been released to the public is just like dispatches, like when the dispatcher is calling law enforcement, right, to let them know what's going on, what kind of call they received, what to be on the lookout for. And so you have emergency dispatch saying, quote, be en route to 110 Ben Hill Road off of Beach Creek. It will be the first residence on your right, in reference to a missing 4-year-old. So Summer was 5 at the time. I'm not sure who said that she was 4, if it was mom or dad. We can kind of come back and be like, maybe dispatcher got something wrong. Maybe I'm, in this scenario, not calling that. I don't think that's what happened at all. It says, listen to this. The parents have called in and advised that the mother had gone for a walk, came home, and now they can't find her. They have been yelling for her. She has been gone about 10 minutes now. Don was at work. Mm-hmm. Don was driving home when Candace called on 1, right? Mm-hmm. The parents, did not call. Maybe they have the parents misconstrued with mom and grandma. Mm-hmm. Okay. They also say, dispatcher says, mom had gone for a walk, comes back to not find the child. We have multiple accounts of Candace saying she does not go for walks. You can tell that she's not a walker by nature, really. And she will say, though, by her own accord, the same reason that she's not suspect that Summer went missing, because she went off chasing wildlife or into the woods to frolic, because they told her to be fearful of all the wildlife. Summer would never walk around by herself out in the woods, right? Never, ever. And Candace will say that she doesn't for the same reason. So the fact that the dispatcher says that this 4-year-old, 5-year-old, right, was missing, and that mom had gone for a walk. But remember, mom had gone to fix grandma's knee brace and was gone for 2 whole minutes, 120 seconds when Summer got it, right? So Candace says to the WJHL News Network. A whole different time. I don't go on walks around here or on runs because I'm scared of the bears and snakes and even the coyotes. The dispatcher, like I said that the parents have called in, but in theory, they were supposed to have been in 2 different locations at this time. The calls, again, from Candace and Dawn have not been released to the public. But also keep in mind that Dawn first tells reporters and anyone who will listen that when he gets there, no one had gotten there yet, that he pulls up and the cops weren't there yet. And then you hear that actually when he got there were 2 or 3 cop cars there, and he didn't even go to the top of the hill where his home is. For the people, like what mom and dad say, they both believe that Summer was abducted from the basement. They say, quote, I feel, this is mom, Candace says, I feel in my heart that somebody has came up here and took her and lured her away from here. And Dawn says, somebody was either hiding in the weeds there waiting for her to come to the basement. We would assume that he's talking about Candace and Grandma at this point. We're 30 feet away when she got gone. All right. Dawn also says, well, I knew right away that she was abducted. I knew that right away. And that's what I told law enforcement from the beginning. But they have to go through their, I forget the word. They have to do one step at a time, I guess. But I'm sorry they have to spend so many man hours in these woods and everything. I mean, I've seen them limping and everything else, and I feel for them.
So I was making some feverish notes.
Okay.
That was one of my questions, because I don't think you and I have talked about that much about their response to searching those woods. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, you don't really need to do that. You don't need to be looking in the woods. You don't, Mm-hmm.
Because there's an abduction, right? So if they paint the narrative of an abduction, we can now open things wide, get things away from our home, get things away from our land. Nothing points to anything else out of that land. We don't know what the dogs hit on. We know immediately within the initial search that there were cadaver dogs and tracking dogs brought in. I don't think they brought in cadaver dogs for any gross negative reasoning, assuming the worst right off the rip, particularly based on the 911 call that they had gotten that had just been a few minutes of missing a child. From what I understand, that was the capability they had, and they had them there and ready, so they just bring them. They came along with the other tracking dogs, okay? And this is kind of a big deal as we move forward. So so immediately the narrative from Dawn, and I'm going to say narrative because it's a horrible thing to think. I don't think most parents would allow themselves to go in that direction. That's your worst fear, right? But that's not what you're telling law enforcement or telling very sincerely to anyone that will listen, is that they're not saying, I'm so terrified that this happened. They're saying, I truly feel, these are their words of verbatim, in my heart, that she was taken, she was lured away, she was abducted, that she's been trafficked. Okay, we'll get to a point where Dawn has said she could be in a basement in chains right now. I just don't know. I just don't find that to be a typical response.
No.
At all. So Dawn said her biggest fear, is her being tormented or locked in a dungeon or a basement or something, because she loved to be outside. Loved to be outside all the time. That was her. Unfortunately, her downfall. Because a lot of times the boys would be inside and we'd be like, where's Summer? Why did you leave her out there alone? Go get Summer. And that's happened over and over again. So he's saying that, the boys would come inside and leave Summer outside, and he'd say, well, go get her. That happens all the time, because being outside was what she loved, past tense. Okay. He says, and we'd come out and she would always be close by, but we were always coming out. She had to be outside. She was an outdoor person. But if she was such an outside person and she was quite used to being out there, quote, alone, then why on that day did Candace have to say, I walked her to the house to say, boys, take up, watch her, right? And why does Dawn refer to Summer being an outside person as her downfall if she went missing from inside the basement?
Or was abducted.
I know, but they keep saying that someone came to the basement to get her. So why was her being outside her downfall? He's never said she wandered off. He said she was taken. Real quick about the vehicles, and I think it's very important to know there were 3 vehicles on that property. We have Don's work truck, Grandma's truck, and there was a pretty new bright red Subaru. This would be Candace's vehicle. It had a GPS system on it, kind of like an OnStar, okay, called Starlink. The morning that Don went to work, the morning in question, he actually took Candace's Subaru. He makes kind of a deal about this. This wasn't the normal thing for him to do. He didn't take this car to work every day. He's kind of a drywall plaster guy right now. He's had a multitude of construction-esque jobs. I would venture to say the ones that don't require, not that any of this work is bad, and I'm not saying that everybody who does this is a felon. He, however, is a felon. So he needed to find odds and ends types jobs that he could get easily without a whole bunch of background checks. I'm sure we'll go over his record. Don't worry. And he was at this time doing a drywall type job. So a bit of a, he's going to get a little dirtier, right? He's going to get the drywall mud on him and his shoes, and then potentially in this new car. So why would he even take it? But Don stated that he was paying $600 a month for that car, and it just sat there doing nothing. So he thought he would get some use from it. So he did say that his boys came and made fun of him, his work boys, about his car, saying that he's using a brand new car for drywall, and that was silly. So he was asked what he remembered of Summer that morning, and he said that she was asleep by his side when he woke up, that she just had to be by him. She had to be by him all the time. She loves me to death. We tried to make her sleep in her own bed, and she'd come to me with big tears and say, "But Daddy, I want to sleep with you. I want to be with you." And he said, "I just couldn't say no." For 5 years every night. But then when he was asked, when was the last time you saw Summer? He says, "Oh, that morning when I woke up, because she was sleeping in between me and her mother." When he's asked, what are the last words she ever said to you? He said, "Oh, well, I'm not sure if it was that night or not, but I remember clearly. I said, 'Summer, you got to sleep in your own bed.' But she came back with big crocodile tears and said, 'But Daddy, I want to be with you.'" But previously, he had just said every night for 5 years, she slept under beside him. She couldn't get away. But I guess that night in question, he had made her, right? He had asked her to go to her bed. So he remembers that the last thing she said to him was, "Daddy, I want to be near you." From the timeline, the drive home took Don at least 37 minutes, and he went deliberately to that shed that I told you about to search. But he did not search it or the surrounding area. When he was asked if their phones could give more accurate data on the timings for the day, remember that? Don says, quote, "Well, magically, all our phone records from 3:30 onwards that day have been deleted." And he is referring to himself, Candace, and Grandma.
Meaning they personally deleted their stuff.
He did not say that. He said that magically, all of their phone records from 3:30 on that day have been deleted. So all 3 adults that Les potentially saw, all immediate family members as well. So that's something. The milk jug, I'm going to quickly go over this before we start to wrap up. In that picture with Summer, okay, where she's sleeping in the car. See those milk jugs? They're in an odd position. I would almost say that if she were not leaning on them, they may fall in the floorboard if you hit your brakes or anything else. At least that top one's going to slide off. It's cold. There's going to be condensation. As you can imagine, there are people who venture to say that Summer is not alive in this photo. You kind of can't gather that from this photo. I would say in my experience, I'm not seeing anything that screams to me that she's not alive. I'm not seeing modeling, any of the things. I'm not seeing exceptionally darker blue nail beds. Her lips do look a little bluer, but they could just be if she legitimately was cold. She's also sleeping on cold milk. And if she had just come out of, if she was in one of the, a certain kind of a creek or a watering hole in the mountains, a lot of those are spring fed and they are ice cold, to be fair. So, that's kind of neither here nor there for me. However, Hunter says that he was on the other side of her. So picture her left side there. And that when he got out of the vehicle, he says that the milk jugs had been in the middle or on the floorboard. Candace says, no, that's not what happened at all. He had them in his lap. And when asked, well, then how did they get over there when he got out of the vehicle? And Candace says she uses her body to reach over. And she says that he reached over her and just put him there. And so to clarify, the interviewer says, oh, so he reached over Summer as she's sitting there and put them on the other side of her. And she says, yes. This makes no sense. There's no reason you would do that. They have an entire king cab floorboard in front of them. Why would you reach over the 5-year-old and then place them like that? Because do you remember that Hunter and Candace both agreed that Summer was awake when he got out of the vehicle? She wasn't sleeping like this. So if she's sitting up and talking, why is he putting these there, and how are they still there?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you earlier, what is that on her left shoulder?
I think it's a hood from that tracksuit.
Okay.
Kind of flopped over, best I can tell in the photo.
Okay.
Because it looks like it's almost the same color or material as that front gray colored kind of portion of it's kind of like inside out a little bit.
Okay.
Don's statement that he called Candace at 3 p.m. and that Candace was in line at Walgreens when he called is not consistent. Her prescription was picked up, Grandma's, at 1:33 p.m. and they had already been to the swimming hole. So if he actually rang her at 3 p.m., they would have been on their way home. He says they were in the line for the drugs, for the medication from Grandma. But he also says it was 3 p.m. Now, Hunter says that Don called Candace when they were in line at Walgreens and that Don said that he was at home and that he felt like somebody sketchy was there looking around. Weird. When Candace hears this, she gets angry and you can hear her tone change. And she says, I don't know why he likes to lie about this, talking about Hunter. Talking about him lying that Don ever called while they were in the Walgreens line and that he ever said anything like that. She's getting mad because there's no way Don could be home, right? Because Don's at work. That's his entire alibi, is that he's at work. So Don also says that he had checked the clock and said, well, I realized there's no sense in coming home. I'm not going to come home early when nobody's at home. Okay, well, your 3 boys were supposed to have been at home. He says more than once that, well, I wasn't going to go home early. Nobody was home. His 3 sons were there. Also, Hunter says that he was told by Candace when she picked him up that day, he said, oh, where are the boys? And she told him they went to work with Don. We don't have an alibi for Don, but Don was supposed to have been at work all day. He can't remember what time he left to go. Potentially he called while they were in the Walgreens line, but he said that was at 3 o'clock, which couldn't line up with Candace's timeline. But Hunter said he did call while he was there, and Candace said, well, he didn't say what Hunter said he said. So are you tracking?
Yeah.
I want you to know that when any one of them individually are asked anything, Grandma will say, well, I don't know. I can't speak to Candace. Candace will say, I don't know. I can't speak to anything, Don says. And Don will say, basically, I've got an alibi, bitches, because he talks about that Starlink, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm not going to go over the story again about the planting flowers, washing hands, giving a piece of candy, walking in, the kids, the toys, the basement, Mom, the knee brace, right? Like this narrative. And I say this because Mom, Grandma, and Don constantly, this is all they say. They don't say, but you know what? This one time Summer did this. Maybe this is what they don't speak about Summer as an individual, like as their daughter. It's like they have a script that that's all they say. You would think that Grandma would have some different perspective, or she would say, oh yeah, I was in the camper. Like, I never even hear Candace came over and helped me. This thing was driving me crazy. And so then I went in here and turned on Oprah, right?
Yeah.
She says, and Candace fixed my knee brace. She was only gone for a minute or two. And then she went back to the house to check on Summer. Like, they all have the same vantage, like the same perspective. And that's kind of bizarre. Also, we know that at least 13 dogs live on the property. They say that people just drop them up there and dump them, maybe or maybe not. But when they're asked about if there was someone who actually came to abduct her, how that would work with all these dogs that bark, Don says that they weren't there that day. Quote, they go off for days sometimes and come back all beat up and hungry. But law enforcement says that the dogs were there when they arrived, as they caused an issue with the search and cadaver dogs that they had brought with them. Okay. So, I mean, that's kind of it's a big one. Like all of those over a dozen dogs just weren't there that day. They do that sometimes collectively. They go away. He thinks somebody could have been in the woods lurking. Again, stranger abduction makes absolutely zero sense to me. They would have had to know that they had an advantage there, have to know that an adult's not present or not paying attention, have to know the child even existed up there, have to know where the basement is, have to get away without the detection of the dogs. So when we noted her hair a moment ago, when I said this picture may look different than other photos I've shown you. So guys, if you're just listening, Summer is a doll. She's a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed, frail framed little bitty 5-year-old girl at the time that she went missing. I've shown you a few pictures of her here and here. But when Summer went missing, she looked a bit more like the picture on the left. That is one of Dawn's mugshots on the top right. That's a picture of Candace it looks like maybe a year or two prior with little Summer. The picture of Summer on the left, she has very close cropped hair. There it's buzzed. There's actually another picture where it's completely almost shaved bald. When asked about this, it changes. At some point, Mom has said that she liked that her brothers had shaved heads. So she wanted to look like them. So she shaved her head so it would look like them. But then Dawn says that Mom had her hair cut short and that Summer liked that and wanted to look like Mom. So she shaved it to look like Mom's. And then another time they said that Summer got into hair clippers and started, and it was all different lengths. So they just had to shave it all to make it look even. And then Mom shaved her head so Summer wouldn't feel bad about it. They also talk about the fact that she loved Frozen and wanted to be like Princess Elsa, which kind of goes against the idea that she would want to have her head shaved like her brothers. Sadly, we know that sometimes the shaving of a head, particularly in a girl who wants long hair, is used as punishment. We don't know if that's what happened here. And it's really actually super sad to think about that. But just know that that is something that has sadly taken place and does. Here's some more pictures of Summer there. These are all very close to the time that she went missing. She had just had her head shaved soon before she went missing. Some people have thrown out the idea of lice, like maybe one of the kids got lice and they shaved heads to make that easy. Maybe. I would like to think that if that was the case, Mom or Dad would be like, oh yeah, we had lice run rampant, so we just shaved their heads.
Yeah. Which would explain Mom having a short hair too, or whatever.
Correct. Right? And it, here's the deal. It could be, and again, Mom's saying like maybe she would think that would look like being a bad mom, so she didn't want to say it. I don't know. There are more scary thoughts on that too. I mean, people have come back to say like maybe there was preparation for something going on. Like maybe we're trading, trafficking, some sort of a transaction going to take place. I don't think there's an animal attack. I mean, there could have been. They have dogs all over there, though. And she had just gone. I mean, it was within moments that you've got cops and dogs out there of her being gone in those woods. So it's just less likely. Hunter did report that while swimming at the lake, Summer had gone underwater. Again, Candace dismissed this, if you remember. This has led to the theory of dry drowning. I'll make it quick. If you haven't heard of dry drowning, it is where usually more so when you have something forceful like a current or waves and it can happen to an adult too. It's a little easier to happen in a child because they have less volume in their lungs, but where you take in water and it's enough that it starts to form kind of an imbalance in fluids within your respiratory system. I won't get in the weeds with that, but that you could even like be awake and seemingly be okay. A lot of times it will come with some coughing and sputtering at first, though. Usually it's not, which is kind of like nothing. And then maybe a child comes home, takes a nap, and then doesn't wake from the nap. And then you find out sadly later that their lungs had, in fact, taken on fluid. That's called, some people call it dry drowning. It's actually nothing dry about it other than the fact that you're no longer, your body's not submerged in water, but your lungs, your breathing capacity is. So it's still wet. So one of the theories is that people think that she is actually deceased in the photo, that was taken to kind of prove this alive situation, and that maybe either they knew that she had passed away at that time, or maybe they didn't and she was just taking a nap and it happened later. And that they reported her missing to avoid any negligent charges, because we know that they've got a lot of other things going on. That's still tough. We don't know for sure if cadaver dogs hit on anything.
Mm-hmm.
I've not seen if they did. But again, it's kind of like, okay, if she's at home, not alive, I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. When I know the backstories to some of this other stuff, I'm less inclined to think that the secondary drowning, that would be, in my view, that or her just wandering away and succumbing to an animal or the elements, sadly, I think would be the best case scenarios for Summer. And unfortunately, I don't feel like it was either one of those things.
Or the car. Being in the car too long.
I thought about that, like when they went down to the watering hole, if in fact they were doing all kinds of other extracurricular activities and left her in the car and she actually overheated. I do think, though, that her coloring doesn't look like such in that photo. Right. I think she'd have pink cheeks and maybe visible sweat, and it wasn't. I looked it up. It looks like mid 80s as a high that day in Rogersville, Tennessee, in June. So, it's an option, but maybe a little less likely. But we know that children are at a greater risk amongst people they know, right? So between abductions or abuse, often it is a family or a friend of the family. And we do have Dawn and Candace on both sides of that family, and every branch of that tree have a lot of skeletons in those closets. Personal history really quick. So grandma in question, the one with the knee, who might have been pain shopping. I don't know. No one's ruled it out. Pain med shopping that day that she had to go get that knee checked up on, but went to 7,000 other things that day. She has 5 aliases. She's moved around quite a lot, and she has a long criminal history, including violence on children. She actually left the family home earlier on in life when her 2 girls, Candace and Rose, were small, to go live with her, like a female partner. The girls were raised by their father. Her other daughter, who is Candace's sister, Rose, coincidentally, this is bizarre, in 2009 in Wisconsin, as a young adult, I think she was 21 years old, went missing. She's never been found again. I think some people had blamed the ex-husband. Maybe they cleared him. Either way, it looks fully unrelated to anything going on here with Summer. Grandma's brother, Warren, has been incarcerated for over 40 years for pretty heinous charges, including 8 counts of incest with a minor. Grandma left the property there where she lived on their camper about 2 weeks after Summer disappeared, and was gone for a while. Friends of the family will say that she was going to visit a friend whose husband had a heart attack and to help out, but she was kind of gone back and forth to Wisconsin for a while, pretty much immediately after this, and hasn't really had a big presence with the media or anything else. Pretty much crickets there. She does not talk about Summer, really. She'll answer questions about the day, but it's all that timeline narrative. It's all that the same story that I just gave you from Candace that they keep all saying. A little bit about Candace. When she was 19 years old, she married a man that was 41, and they had 2 children. Both Candace and that previous husband were convicted on multiple domestic violence and battery charges. Both of those 2 previous children she had, they were 2 years old and 6 months, respectively, when they were taken into foster care and then adopted permanently. So she does not have custody of her first 2 children. And then a little bit about Dawn. Let me give you a few photos of Dawn in case you forgot what that charmer looked like. There's one. Let's see if I can find a different one. Oh, here's Dawn. See if I can find a different one. Oh, there he is. There he is. So that's Dawn. That's Dad. So he had a, not great childhood. So he was physically abused by his father. His father sexually abused his sisters. When he was 12, he went to live with his biological father and the new wife and family in Utah. The day after Summer went missing, okay, I want you to hear this really quickly. I know this has gone long, but this is important to this case. The day after Summer went missing, Dawn's stepsister, Jeannie, called law enforcement and reported that Dawn had actually molested her when she was 5 years old, and that this abuse continued for 7 years until she finally exposed it to her mother and stepfather. Dawn does not deny this, and I'm going to let you hear him talk about it. However, his view is that they were kind of like in a relationship or playing house, and that Jeannie had been the one to initiate any contact. So when Dawn was incarcerated around 19 years old, in and out of prison, burglary, drug, long-term meth addiction, trafficking cocaine. He was previously married and had 2 children, like Candace had been as well. He and his wife were frequently reported to Child Protective Services. They were both addicted, mom and dad, to meth at this time. Their relationship ended. He met Candace and they moved to Tennessee. They started a family, and Dawn was soon arrested for domestic violence in October of 2020. It happened more than once. He shoved her down. He's been called. If you can believe it, though, these charges didn't stick. Candace will continue to drop the charges, and then Dawn will speak for her and say that they had a, quote, misunderstanding. Okay. He's been arrested for multiple DUIs. I want you to hear this really quickly. This will just be the phone call where his stepsister is talking to him regarding, or one of the other sisters is talking to him regarding the abuse that took place with his stepsister from the time that Dawn was 12 to 19. Okay. So she was 5 to 12 when this took place. So let me pull it up for you. Maybe. Oh, no, I've got it right here, actually.
These things say, oh, poor Summer, poor Summer. Well,
Really quickly, I want you to know that he just started with, everybody thinks that, well, poor Summer, poor Summer. This is Dawn speaking in the past couple of years, okay?
Summer loves her fucking daddy. These things say, oh, poor Summer, poor Summer. Well, Summer loves her fucking daddy.
I just wanted to let you know that I talked to Jeannie last night, and she told me that she was going to press charges against you, Donnie. So, yeah, so I wanted to let you know. Yeah. And that friend of hers, I guess she's going to be with her. She's pressing charges too. You know, when we heard that Summer went missing, that everything came back to her because she was 5 years old at the time it started, and Summer is 5 years old, so she just...
Yeah, she ain't taking no blame in her part, though, but she did.
Yeah, but Donnie, she was 5. How could she take the blame? I mean, a 5-year-old don't
of course not. She ain't gonna know shit. She ain't gonna take no blame to nothing. She loves shit shows because she's right in the middle of one. She stole the spotlight off my daughter, What Matters, okay? And now it's all about Jeannie.
Oh.
Nobody's even looking for my daughter anymore. They don't even care anymore. Nobody gives a fuck anymore.
Well, what about you?
Nobody's even searching. Nobody's even fucking searching for my daughter anymore. No. I have to go out and look for her. Because nobody else gives a fuck no more.
I mean, you guys are, looking for her, right? You're still...
Yeah, I'm trying to, but now it's like I'm up to my charges, too. What are my boys going to do? Just stay in foster care for the rest of their life now? Thanks a lot.
I just wish that they could find Summer, Donnie.
Unlike Jeannie, she was never hurt in any way. We played a little bit of house touchy-feely shit. That's all it ever fucking was. Fuck that bitch. You know what? If anybody was evil in this whole thing, it's her.
Yeah.
She's the one.
Right.
Yeah. She wants to paint me up to be this evil monster and all this stuff. She's the one that initiated it.
Well, I think she just wants...
Man, I tried to apologize to her. I'm done with all that. She's trying to act like she's all hurt, blah, blah, blah. Man, she was never hurt in any way. She initiated this shit. Like I said, where she learned it from, I don't know. Well, I just wanted to call you and let you know what was going on, you know, give you a heads up. I love my kids. Yeah. I love everybody. Right. Well, she was a kid too, Donnie, you know, so yeah, and she should leave it there. That's what she should do, is leave it there.
Yeah. I'm going to spare you the rest of that, but a synopsis is that he is confronted about the incest with his stepsister when he was 12 to 19 and she was 5 to 12. 5, the same age as Summer was when she went missing. And he says that we did some touchy-feely stuff. She initiated it. Where's her blame in it? And that it was silly playing house stuff. So knowing that, I just, oh God. It's, I don't know. It sounds tough. It sounds like a stretch. There are people saying things kind of along the lines of, like, if there is some similarity in what happened to Summer and what happened to his stepsister, who was the same age, he said, for instance, these are his words, I could never understand why he hated me so much. He's talking about his father. And he loved my sister so much. And there, Don is confusing molestation with love on his dad's part with what he did with his sisters. He actually will still say that they were like kind of in a relationship, he and his stepsister. So he has said this about Summer, his daughter. He says, quote, we had such a great love for each other. I'd never had somebody love me that much in my life. It's been awesome between me and her. And maybe nothing. It's kind of an interesting way. So anyway, some theories are that when she says, but Daddy, I want to sleep with you, maybe his perception of that could be different. What you need to know is that his only potential alibi, this is about the last thing I'm going to read to you because my throat's not going to work anymore, is that when he had one interview, he relates that the day before Summer went missing, he had fired his coworker. He kind of makes a big deal about this, and he says that that man appeared to be under the influence of meth, and that after lunch, Don told him just to go home, get out of this job, don't come back. And Don will say that that man got mad, threatened retribution, tried everything he could. He said he tried everything to get me fired, and he called my bosses constantly and harassed me on job sites. It was also like one day prior, so I don't know how many times he could have called and harassed job sites, but either way, so he says in early August, she went missing in June, that the only person who could have given an alibi to him would be the one man that was vengeful toward him that he had fired. Okay. So like potentially the one alibi he's going to get, he's not going to get because this guy's not going to give it to him, right? So now he's kind of set himself up with a little bit of a little fall there, right? Like, well, I've got an alibi, but he probably won't have my back on this because I fired him and he was mad at me, right? But he goes on then in November to claim, quote, I have 7 alibis, if not more, including my buddy Starlink. So he says, it's pretty great I had that car that day, because it has a GPS tracker, so you don't have to question anywhere that I was. He goes on to say that, quote, Candace ain't got none, she's going down. And evidently he said this during a live stream with Candace, and then they get in like a drunken argument. Okay? Of course, law enforcement has that GPS, has that Starlink. We don't. So all we can do is tell you what Don said he did that day. We don't know how much of any of that is true. But potentially he has that. So people talk about the fact that maybe the absence of alert by cadaver dog suggests that she was still alert or alive the last time she left the home. We don't know though. Like if they hit on something, there's potentially we don't know that, right? people speculate that maybe they caused her to disappear because CPS was already kind of working around the home and they didn't want further retribution if, in fact, there had been sexual abuse that could be found out about. And it is interesting that he says there was a, quote, magical disappearance of phone records for himself, Candace, and Grandma after 3:30 that day. All three, I at least think they at least know what happened to her. Whatever their involvement looks like, they know something. Something to note as well is that within just a few weeks of Summer going missing, CPS came and removed all three boys from the home. It's been almost 4 years now, and the boys are not back home with Candace and Don. So kind of true to their first families, very, very sadly, but true. If anybody has any credible information about the disappearance of Summer Moon Utah Wells, please call 1-800-TBI-FIND. I'm hopeful in this one. I don't always feel that way. I just think that we don't know what the boys have said. We don't know what that GPS shows. And I think they've got to be waiting on something. And like you said, sadly, maybe recovery of remains. But I'm a little more hopeful on this one than I have been on some of our unsolved with little ones like this.
Yeah. Just because you have all those indicators there. You've got data. You've got, phones. You've got stuff you can go through. And
look, I'm telling you guys, if you have nothing to do, go back and listen to interviews with those two. It's a mess. A mess. It's someone had made either a podcast or a YouTube, or someone had made the comment of like, I'm surprised. Something like, I'm surprised law enforcement hasn't made them quit doing interviews. And I told Brian, I was like, oh no, this is a prize. Yes. Keep talking.
Oh yeah.
As of right now, law enforcement says that the family is not cooperating. They say that they have lawyered up. Dad spent about a year in jail on a DUI charge and was able to get off without having to be mandated toward rehab. I think that was potentially going to be one of the stipulations. He didn't have to do it, but they kind of, in theory, they're still together, but I don't know. They're not super cohesive. Like, they stick to that one same story, but that's kind of it, I don't know. So we'll see. Maybe it just takes a little while for the pieces to fall there and arguments to ensue, but I don't know. I don't believe that it was a stranger abduction.
No.
I don't think she wandered off. I think something could have accidentally happened to her, and they're making moves to hide that, or potentially could have been involved in a transaction.
Yeah, you've leaned on that one.
I don't want to, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that kind of like what I said, not just because I read somebody else says it, now it feels corroborated, so now I feel more right about it. But like, I did read then some other people had said kind of the same thing. Like, potentially, like I said, when we were going for a walk, I think when I mentioned maybe it was a transaction that mom's IQ doesn't seem super, super high. Like, maybe there was either a miscommunication or something. Maybe there was supposed to be a temporary transaction and something happened and Summer didn't come back when she was supposed to. I don't know. I mean, I hope to goodness not. I mean, I hope it was something as simple as like a secondary drowning and that's it. And the worst part of this is that they're covering that up, for fear of, other negligent stuff. But I don't know. It just doesn't feel good. Yeah. Especially after like seeing those conditions and knowing the history amongst them all. I mean, including even Grandma had like violence on children charges. So like, this isn't, I didn't tell you this. There was what had been actually a really good friend of Candace's who did say that one time they were at the pool, hot summer months, and the boys were kind of just horse playing, rough housing in the pool, as 3 boys are going to do. And Candace got onto them and had them come out of the pool and wearing nothing but their swim trunks. So their bellies were bare and legs and arms, had them all lie belly down, like face down on the hot summer pavement until she told them to get up. And so they did get a bit burned. So, and there was another friend of Candace's that said that she had witnessed her, and this woman's words were just, quote, abuse her sons, abuse the boys. Another friend says that she called her bipolar. I don't know if she was saying that anecdotally as just like, you know, because she's all over the place mentally, or if she legitimately has a diagnosis. And then we, of course, know Don's history with sexual assault and other things. So it's just the child, unfortunately, didn't have a lot of chance there. Silver lining maybe is that these 3 boys are alive and living somewhere else entirely now, and hopefully they're in a good place. But either way, I'm gonna clear my throat. That was a lot. We should have made that 2 episodes. I can't lean back like that. It looks ridiculous.
It's like slide down.
I know. Well, now that that's done, guys, my goodness, how are y'all doing? We can relax a little bit. There's still a couple people hanging on in the chats. That was a long show, guys. I see a few people bopped off and came on back. Hey, Bosco, Tyler. Oof. John, if you're still there, thank you for trying to help me. I had all the volumes turned up on all those, like on all those sections. So I'm not sure, but I think what you said is right about it coming through different speakers, and I don't care because I'm not going to do it enough to matter. We had Faulkner in the house again. Tyler S. I think Abby was here earlier. Nighthawk Visuals. It was good to see him. Hey Jake, how you doing? Had a little grab ass. Was it Grab talking about some more Iowa stuff? Did I see that earlier? I couldn't read. We had Sylvie earlier.
I think they said they were going to email it.
Was it just a different Iowa case?
I think it was a couple of them.
Yeah,
a couple more. Yeah, I think that's what it says. Like, I've got a few more for you, maybe.
Dude, okay, yeah, he said, yeah. Listen, I mean, in saying that, like, we should do like night shift Iowa, I'm not kidding. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, there are quite a few out there.
Been sleeping. That should be our new shirt. Sleeping on Iowa.
Yeah.
Who knew? They're not even just, again, I keep saying it. It's not like bang bang, like murder rate increase. It's like horrible.
Yeah, it is weird like that. Remember,
we just covered Jody, who's in Trout, last week.
Yeah,
and then people thought for a while, of course, she was not related, victim wise, to Michelle Martinko. That was another one. We did Kathy Jo Bolkin. We did,
especially for a place with less population. You know, a lot of people go, why were so many serial killers in California in like the 70s and 80s? It's like, I don't know, maybe it's just a lot of people.
Also, college campuses.
Yeah. But Florida, you know, you have these states that kind of stick out. Iowa was not one that I thought was.
I think it's because they're cold. I always say it's just they're too cold.
Yeah. Extremes, cold or
maybe
hot.
Maybe too much corn, like it's fermented.
Could be. Remember the movie Children of the Corn?
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. That's why those kids went wild.
Looking at you, Jerry Burns.
I have not been to Iowa. John's asking me if I've been to Iowa.
No,
I'm a liar. I have been to Iowa.
Oh, you have?
It's Idaho I haven't been to. I've been to Iowa. Remember I told you about going in the Army to that wedding?
Yeah, but I guess I thought it was the opposite.
Yeah,
what's the difference, listeners, in Iowa and Idaho? And I mean that respectfully from the South.
Oh, like if there's beef, like are they rivals?
No. How different are the two states? Like if someone asked me, how different are either Tennessee, North Carolina, or Kentucky and Tennessee or something, I could say, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. When I went out there in the Army, we had a soldier that was getting married. So some of the platoon rented a van and we just drove out there. And my platoon sergeant, because we had 3 black sergeants, 2 or 3 white guys, something like that. But he told the people in the town, like we ate at some little restaurant diner, and he told them that he was the coach of this like whatever tri-county basketball team we were, whatever they believed it. I mean, because we kind of stuck out.
Yeah.
Our buddy had told us, he's like, yeah, it's a small town and everybody's white, but everybody was really cool, really nice at the wedding. It was in a VFW hall, like the reception.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely like that guy had told us, hey, it's going to be like going back in time.
Well, I don't mind
like
that. That doesn't
like
bother me.
Slow and laid back.
We always we talk about it every week. It's the weather that I can't handle.
Yeah.
They're asking if the corn tastes different between the two, and Bosco said one's corn, the other is taters. They're talking a little politics. So Grab just said, okay, you said that the most gruesome was that you said was from Wisconsin. What was that? Do you mind to tell us on here? Or you just want to? I did hear your voice, Bosco. Yeah, if you want to tell us on here, otherwise you can just email it. The Wisconsin case. Oh my gosh! I hope y'all are having a good week. Excuse me. Golly. I know.
You're acting like you just talked for almost 2 hours.
I know. So I'm acting like that would matter usually. It doesn't, but anyway, I don't have anything.
I don't either. I'm glad a few new people popped in.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, do you want to tell what you've got going on? So if you don't, you need to go follow Brian Sanders at Brian Sanders Disruptors on Instagram, and he has a YouTube channel of the same name. It's the Disruptors podcast with Brian Sanders. So if you would like to, would you like to talk about a couple new shows you got that are going to drop?
Yeah, I've been stacking up quite a few. I just recorded one today that's right at 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. And this guy, Jason, who was actually born in Afghanistan, and starts the episode out saying, I was 12 years old when 9/11 happened. And then just tells
And he was
life.
in Kabul.
He was in Kabul, and his family, they fled Kabul shortly after 9/11 because he knew his family was telling him things are getting ready to get chaotic.
Right.
And then he just tells his life history. He read Tom Clancy novels. So when the soldiers got to Afghanistan and eventually started doing operations there, he was able to get Tom Clancy novels and fell in love with it.
I like Tom Clancy.
Yeah. And he just said, I wanted to live a life of a spy and I wanted a life of adventure. And I hated the Taliban. And he talks about how oppressive they were. It's an incredible episode. He eventually becomes an interpreter. He lies about his age in order to become an interpreter because you had to be a certain age. Survived, I think it was like over 300 firefights, 3 different IED explosions. I mean, just incredible guy to talk to. And I don't want to give away too much of it, but that all spun off of a previous episode I had with a guy named Worth Parker, who had actually helped this guy, Jason's family, get out of Kabul during the fall of Kabul when Americans were leaving.
You should definitely link those two. Like when you like post your stories or whatever, have one and be like, and then listen to this one, like the continuation.
Yeah, it was cool. So I've got quite a few stacked up like that. I've got one Matt Pitcher talking about going undercover into a Greek mob kind of organized crime thing. He went under for about 1.5 years, I think.
They just like threw feta aggressively at each other.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It didn't start out that way. He had a whole different goal.
Gorgonzola. Sorry.
I'm going to tear that salad up, by the way. If there's any left, speaking of feta and all that, I'm going to eat a bunch of salad here in a minute. But anyway, yeah, a bunch of
no, you've had some really cool guests lately, for sure.
I've been very fortunate. So some people have pushed people my way. Some people just reached out and said, hey.
Yeah.
You know, and I approach people too and say, speaking of which, I got a little information for a guest spot I might be doing soon, but I don't want to say anything.
Okay. I like it.
We'll see.
I like it. Bosco, I saw on Facebook the other day that you fell. I'm sorry, but I'm glad that you're doing okay. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up here because I am tired, but I really do appreciate seeing you guys in the chats. It's always so much fun, and I always 10 minutes in remember why I do it every week, because about 10 minutes before we go on air, that is not the case because I'm tired, and I think that Nobody's going to care. And I did all the work for naught. But here we are. And I am glad to get that case out there. I I always say it, but we kind of really focus on unresolved a lot. And we always say, hopefully, you just never know, maybe whatever, right? And this case is doable. This is solvable. It's just been almost, 4 years. And I will check it out, Bosco. I'll check it out. But there's a reason we do it, and I think that it's good to keep this one out there. This one doesn't. There was a lot of coverage initially, and everything kind of petered out like 3 years ago or so. And so, but there is a lot of information out there about it.
Yeah, Nighthawk Visuals was on earlier in the chats and said, "How did I not see this one?"
Yeah, and that's when he lives in the same state. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So definitely, that's good to know. If you guys do have any information, anybody listening, please call that 1-800-TBI-FIND. But without further ado, we also real quick, we are kind of changing a site about our merch stuff. So we've got some fun designs in the works, but we can't really sell anything till we get them back on this new site. So we'll let you know when that comes about. And I think that should cut it for now, right?
I think so.
Okay.
That salad.
I'm getting hungry.
Is there any left?
I think so.
Okay.
Would you like to tell the people good night?
Yeah. Good night, everybody. Hey, I looked in the camera.
You did so good. All right, y'all. Hey, thanks again for being in the chats. We do love to see you guys. So until next week, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Good night, y'all.